And I think sometimes we can get a bit too attached to thinking, oh, we need to recreate meat-laden dishes if we're going to continue carrying on a tradition. Because actually, I think many times you might not get exactly there, but you can certainly bring the memory back with plants.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Yasmin Khan is an author, broadcaster, and human rights campaigner based in London. After releasing The Saffron Tales, Zaytun, and Ripe Figs, she has a new cookbook, Sabzi, a collection of over 80 vegetarian recipes drawing from her travels and Iranian-Pakistani heritage. It's so special to have Yasmin on the show to talk about adapting traditional recipes for a plant-based diet, motherhood and the power of culinary lineage, and more. Yasmin Khan, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have the opportunity to speak with you. I am always a fan of your books, and this new one, Sabzi, is no exception. I guess to start, I was wondering if you could tell me an early food memory that you have that you think maybe informed your point of view in some way.
Sure. Well, my mother's side of the family are from Iran, and they are farmers. And my main memory of kind of hanging out with my grandparents and my extended family are these big lunches that my grandmother and my aunts would prepare. Now, in Iran, lunch is the main meal of the day. And on the sofra, which would be this like patterned tablecloth that we would place on the floor that we'd all sit cross-legged around, there would always be steamed Persian rice, straight from the farm. There'd be these rich herb-laden stews. There'd be salads. There'd be kind of yogurt dishes. There'd be pickles. It was such an assortment and it was such a feast. But actually, the thing about that food memory that strikes me the most is the sense of connection of all of us sitting around. Sometimes there'd be like 15 of us, uncles, aunts, kids. And honestly, even to this day, when I think about those meals, I just hear laughter. I hear kind of the crunch of tahdig. I hear kind of arguing over like something that might be going on that day. And I think for me, that is what eating and good food is all about. It's those connections that we share, not just over the ingredients, but over the actual process of eating a meal together.
Yeah, I love that story and image. I think food is such a great connector. And even looking at your own career, you have this incredible background working in the human rights space, being a lawyer, et cetera. And the last time you were on the show, I believe was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm curious how your relationship with like food as a medium for storytelling is these days, and if you think it's shifted over the past 5 or so years since the last time you were on the show.
That's such a good question. I was also reflecting on the last time that I was on the show, which was for my Palestinian cookbook, Zaytun. And I remember having just like such a powerful conversation at the time. And I think I actually wrote a piece for Taste about Gaza at the time, and the food of Gaza and the blockade. So it kind of feels weird to kind of revisit that today and kind of the context where we are. So in a way, my work and my relationship to food has definitely changed in that time frame. I mean, last time I was on, I was talking about this kind of book and the big reportage that I was doing, and I was doing so much more travel, which has been a feature of all my books, right? Kind of storytelling, cooking in people's home kitchens. And these days I'm at home a lot more. I recently became a mother after kind of quite a long and tortured path that I've also written about. So, my some readers might be familiar with my story. It kind of took me a long time to become a mum. And now I am really enjoying, I guess, revisiting some of the places I went to in my travels through the things that I'm cooking in my kitchen.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you kind of encapsulated where you're at and where you've been recently, because I think while reading Sabzi, I was thinking so much about the way that your travels are informing the book, obviously, because you're the person that you are now through those experiences, but it does feel much more of like a kind of interior personal book. And I'm wondering if you would just say a little bit about how you first began developing the idea for Sabzi and then how you went about actually developing the book itself.
Yes, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. This feels like a really fun book in terms of it's an opportunity for me to invite readers into my kitchen and my home. It kind of feels like my most personal book to date. Um, and the name Sabzi and the idea for the book actually has been germinating for like a really long time. I think I first had the idea when I was in New York back like about like 6 or 7 years ago. I was just like, oh, I think I should write a vegetarian cookbook at some point. And, if I do, I want to call it Sabzi because Sabzi is this word in Persian, which means greens and fresh herbs. And obviously my mom's from Iran, but it's also a word in Urdu, the language of Pakistan, which means fresh vegetables or cooked vegetables, sorry. So it was kind of there in the background. And I think a lot of creatives will resonate with that. Like you have an idea, but it feels really far away. And then during the pandemic, I met and then later married a guy who was vegetarian. And so the cooking I did at home kind of changed quite a lot. It became a lot. I mean, it's always been veg forward, as yeah, people who will have seen my previous books will know. But all of a sudden, it was quite important to me to have kind of meals that we shared, that we could share together with my partner, which reflected some of the flavors I grew up with. So then I set myself this kind of little challenge just for me of trying to make plant-based, vegetarian or vegan versions of kind of Persian classic stews, which are often very kind of meat heavy. So that, I guess, made the book kind of come into life because I was cooking a lot whilst I was pregnant. This is kind of when I mainly wrote the book. And it's a collection of recipes inspired by my travels, but very much rooted in the cooking I like to do at home. So full of flavor, quite easy to make, and really encapsulating all of those wonderful Middle Eastern and Mediterranean ingredients.
Yeah, I think reading the book, I was so interested in this idea of culinary lineage, which is something you talk about in terms of what are the recipes that were passed down through your family to you that you want to pass down to your own child. Also, how do they fit into the way that you cook and eat at home, which, as you mentioned, is, mostly vegetarian, it seems, at least based in cooking for your partner as like a whole family unit. And I was curious if there were any like traditionally like meat-based dishes that you were working on adapting for the book that were kind of a good case study to talk about, like what is traditional, what can be adapted.
Yes. Now, I think that most people kind of accept that, we should be eating more vegetables and it's kind of good for us. It's good for our health. It's good for the health of the planet. But I feel that what often holds us back is some of the emotional connections we have to food. And I think especially if you come from some kind of immigrant background and you're kind of a second generation immigrant, because you kind of have the food that your parents cooked, which was perhaps different to kind of the food that everyone else was cooking. And in those particular realms, there's such an important connection to ancestry and lineage, as you described. But of course, food is like a language. It's constantly evolving. And I really started thinking deeply about that when I was adapting these recipes. And I think the one that perhaps is a really good example of this is Ghormeh Sabzi, which is this herb-laden Iranian stew. I would say it's like the national dish of Iran. It's traditionally made with lamb, but it's also got like maybe like a pound of like fresh herbs in there. It's got red kidney beans. It's got dried limes. And it's the dish that maybe I most commonly associate with my heritage, my Iranian heritage. And in the book, I have a recipe where I use oyster mushrooms that are fried in some butter. So they've got that lovely kind of rich, juicy, umami kind of flavor kind of running through them. And I use that as a substitute whilst making a stew, which has, again, a few more kind of deeper notes in it. So it still has all the herbs, it still has the dried limes, it still has the red kidney beans. And I genuinely was quite shocked when I made that recipe or like developed it and realized that actually when I ate it, it was hitting those taste points. I was getting that hit on the back of my tongue that brought back the memory. And I think sometimes we can get a bit too attached to thinking, oh, we need to recreate meat-laden dishes if we're going to continue carrying on a tradition. But because actually, I think many times you might not get exactly there, but you can certainly kind of bring the memory back with plants.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because I think of, Persian food, Iranian food as such a herb heavy, like vegetable heavy cuisine that obviously like there are these dishes that have meat as a part of it, but it doesn't really seem like the most essential part of the flavor.
I think you're absolutely right. And I remember something that my mum always used to tell me growing up, meat was very much seen as a way of flavoring a dish. So if you're, so many Persian dishes are kind of rich stews. And the idea that, meat, you can kind of use it, you can use the bones and you can use pieces of meat as seasoning. They don't have to be like the main event if you have all these incredible vegetables, incredible herbs, like fantastic beans and pulses. And I really like that as a concept. And I kind of tried to carry that through. So obviously this book is vegetarian, but if I'm not cooking vegetarian, I've also really tried to think more carefully, I think, about how much meat I'm consuming and in what way.
Yeah, I think that is such an important way to think about like what is the ratio of meat in this dish? What's the intended purpose?
I love Maine lobster for its versatility in the kitchen and its iconic flavor. The sweetest lobster on earth, prepared in pasta, served chilled in a salad, and of course in a lobster roll. Maine's lobster fishery is among the most sustainable in the world, with every lobster harvested by hand, one trap at a time, from independently owned and operated dayboats. Maine lobster can be purchased year-round, fresh or frozen, raw or pre-cooked, shell on or shell off, and with ready-to-eat and ready-to-use options. Visit lobsterfrommaine.com for details.
We're talking a little bit about stews, but there's obviously a wide array of recipes and dishes in the book. I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit about like what is the array of food in the book? How is it kind of organized?
There is a real mix of dishes in here, everything from kind of really bold and bountiful salads that are kind of really filling dishes, not just like a few limp leaves. So one of my favorite recipes in the book is this roast broccoli and lentil salad with this amazing curried tahini dressing. And it's got dates in it as well. So it's kind of like sweet and spicy and creamy and crunchy. So I'm really proud of the salads chapter. But I also have like a great breakfast selection. Again, I think like everyone can get quite stuck in a rut with breakfast dishes. So there's some quite good ideas for smoky tofu shakshukas. There's a lovely recipe in there for a Persian kind of breakfast platter, which is very much how kind of we eat at the weekends. So loads of herbs, fresh tomatoes, pickles, eggs, this kind of lovely kind of meze board that you can have. So, of course, there's lots of stews in there as well because of the Persian heritage, but also some incredible creamy coconut-infused dals, a personal favorite, the halloumi lasagna, which is filled with like Mediterranean vegetables such as eggplants, courgettes, and a rich kind of cinnamon spiked tomato sauce with kind of strips of halloumi on top. That's very inspired by a dish I ate in Cyprus that was quite similar. There's some kind of Southeast Asian influences as well because I used to live in Thailand. So some of my favorite kind of curries are in there.
I'm really glad you called out your salad section because I think it's one of my favorites. I like to make something that I call opulent salads at home, which are just salads with a lot of good things in them. And I think you definitely have a lot of opulent salads in the book. And I also enjoy these kind of quotes and proverbs that you have at the beginning of every section. The salad proverb I want to read out loud because I think it's so fun. It's, "Let the salad maker be a spendthrift for oil, a miser for vinegar, a statesman for salt, and a madman for tossing." Where does that come from?
I think that's a Spanish proverb, if I remember correctly. It was a Spanish friend that told me it, and I just thought it was so spot on, wasn't it? That it's such a small technical, I guess, task, the tossing a salad, but it actually makes such a difference. And I am a big believer in using your clean hands, of course, as much as possible, because there's something about trying to make sure every leaf or every vegetable is kind of coated in whatever you are dressing. I love salads, and I think almost too often, again, we can get either stuck in a rut or just turn to, I don't know, a bit of lettuce and tomato and cucumber. But I've tried to come up with ideas which perhaps are a bit more unusual, using, the typical kind of Mediterranean ingredients that I talked about in the past, whether it's fricassee or sun-dried tomatoes or using kind of cherries and almonds in salads. But also spices. There's a great orange salad in there that's inspired by Morocco. It's like an orange and radish salad, and it's got lovely cumin and paprika in the dressing. So I hope that people will find salad dressings, but also maybe techniques that they can not only apply to the vegetables that I've written about, but perhaps, your own favorite kind of veg at home.
Yeah, I think it definitely instills more of a maximalist viewpoint towards salad. Like, what is another thing that I can add that would make this even better, that would contrast the other ingredients even more?
Absolutely. And for me, it's, there's a couple of things that are non-negotiable with a good salad. I want a lot of texture, I want different texture. I want a lot of color, and I want a dressing that kind of really makes the ingredients shine. And, there's a wonderful recipe in there for this kind of roughly Gazan inspired tomato salad. And it uses like dill, garlic, and green chili in the dressing. And it is so punchy. It's like a really easy salad to make, like literally ready in like five minutes, like if you're quick at chopping, but so unusual. And so it was a really fun chapter to bring together.
Yeah, and of course, like I called out that proverb because I love a salad, especially, but I think it's interesting to see them kind of sprinkled throughout the book. And I'm curious what made you want to include these kind of contextual cultural quotes, and also how you kind of went about pulling them together.
Yeah, well, I think that I love proverbs in general, right? And it's always so funny, I think, how different cultures have got different emphasis that they put on food. It really came about quite organically. Like, the salad one was just one that I knew from a friend of mine, and I actually think that was the first one that went in. And then there's a really good one at the end, I think, by like Ernestine Ulmer, which is like, life is uncertain, eat dessert first. And that, I think, is from, I think that I just read that in an anthology somewhere.
That was
So
quite
yeah,
famous, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it was kind of fun to kind of intersperse it with a few different kind of food sayings as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I guess while we're talking about recipes, I'm always curious, what recipe in the book was the most difficult to perfect before publication?
So there's a rhubarb and cardamom tart in the book in the dessert section. And I love the flavor of rhubarb. I love the tartness of it. And I really wanted to kind of put it in a tart. So this had kind of many different iterations. At first, it was like a cake. I was like, oh, maybe I can get rhubarb and cardamom in a cake. That would be good together. That didn't really work. In the end, I kind of decided on a kind of frangipan kind of almond filling. And then it was just about kind of to work out kind of what kind of pie tart case to put around it. And in the end, I'm just so happy with what I came up with. It's kind of a really sweet, crisp kind of tart with like a soft, gooey interior. It's really good at warm. It's kind of works fantastically at room temperature. You can also serve it chilled. I think it's really adaptable. And it's just also just so colorful, which I think is what I want when I kind of have a dessert. So I'm just really happy with that one. It's often actually the recipes that take like a little bit of time to perfect that you end up being really proud of. And that's one that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I think it sounds really delicious. And I think, baking can be such a science and an alchemy of like, what is your ideal version of this thing? But I think the one that you landed on sounds really special. I'm curious to talk a little more about this idea of developing Sabzi, like while you were pregnant and, thinking about this idea of culinary lineage. Do you think that like being in this moment in time in your life kind of impacted the recipes that ended up in the book, or the way that you were kind of thinking more broadly about food?
It really did. I almost felt like this book was a sort of a memoir for me of recipes that were important to me or that reminded me of a place. I kind of talked earlier about, living in Thailand for a while and working at this wellness resort. And there was this, incredible, broccoli and tempeh salad with peanut dressing that was always on the menu. And it's like one of my fondest memories kind of living and working there. So, the fact that went in was quite important. But in terms of the lineage, it's actually been really surprising to me, like how hard that's hit. I find it, because of the political situation in Iran, it's really not possible for kind of me and my daughter to travel there at the moment. And one way I can connect her to her heritage, her Iranian heritage, is through the food. And so, earlier this summer when there was it kind of felt like we were going to on the edge of like a huge war in Iran. Actually, I did the strangest thing on this one particular day where I was feeling super stressed about what was going on. Bombs were being dropped kind of near where my family lived. And this is a true story. I literally didn't know what to do. So I was like, well, I can't work this morning. I'm too stressed. I'm too anxious. And I went to the nearby grocery store and I bought like a bunch of herbs and I bought dried limes and I bought like these like Persian flatbreads and cheese. And I came home and I actually cooked, the Sabzi, that rich Persian stew. And I just spent a few hours in the kitchen and then we all ate it together as a family. And honestly, there was something so grounding and so nourishing and so important in that. But also just the fact that I was keeping something alive for my daughter at a time when just life itself felt so fragile. And I think that's one of the most fascinating, anthropological things about food, right? These kind of deep feelings it can evoke in us. It's so primordial almost. I think I was shocked actually how, even though maybe I shouldn't be, because obviously food is kind of a form of therapy, a form of joy for me. Of course, it would be where I go to, but I think now more than ever, I really want my daughter to be able to enjoy these things. And then the pleasure I get when I see her she loves tart flavors, which so obviously has got her Iranian heritage. She'll just sit there and like suck away on a dried lime. And it's just so funny. It's really joyful. And I feel really happy to be able to pass that on to her.
Yeah, I think it is so special not only to be able to tap into your own kind of taste memories and feel grounded in that tradition, but to be able to share that tradition with your daughter and then also by sharing these recipes, maybe make it possible for someone else to be a part of that tradition too. Is that something that you think about in terms of your work more broadly? I know you're really drawn to kind of challenging stereotypes about the Middle East and sharing these cultural traditions. Like, what kind of significance do you think food has in the ability to kind of alter or kind of impact those relationships?
Absolutely. That is a big driver in what I do and why I do it. When my first book, The Saffron Tales, was published, it was so extraordinary to me, with the power of social media, to be able to see people cooking recipes from the regional north of Iran, where my family are from, in, Brooklyn or Berlin or Brisbane. It was just so global. And for many of those people, it's, perhaps the first actual relationship they might have had with Iranian culture. And, I'm sure that when they're serving the food, it sparks conversation. It's like, oh, what is this? Oh, it's from an Iranian, Persian cookbook. What? Oh, that, what's that? And it's so easy to see people from, my book so far have focused on the food and culture of Iran, the food and culture of Palestine, the food and culture of kind of refugee communities, and also Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus. And I think one commonality in those groups is the fact that they're often only seen through a very one-dimensional lens of what is in the news, which is generally terrible. And I think, food in these kind of circumstances isn't just about eating. It's almost like an act of preservation. It's a preservation and also it's a celebration. And it's about seeing these cultures and these people as having a more than one-dimensional, existence. They're people who like to grow, who like to eat, who like to feed, who like to share. And that's why I love what I do so much. It brings me so much joy, whether I'm at an event or whether I'm seeing, pictures of what people have cooked on social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also at the same time, there's a responsibility that I think I can see that you feel in the work that you've done to not just be sharing recipes, but also sharing historical context, cultural context. Like, I think there's a phrase that I see on social media sometimes, which is, I wish you loved us as much as you love our food. And I think, sometimes food is a gateway in, but it's just the gateway.
It really is. And I think there's been kind of an interesting phenomena over the last, let's say, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, where the popularity of Middle Eastern ingredients has just like exploded, hasn't it? Like whether it's pomegranate molasses, whether it's, I don't know, like tahini, dates, barberries, dried lime, sumac, Aleppo pepper. You can get all of these ingredients in kind of mainstream grocery stores now, which is great. Because it's great, I think, when culture travels and they're fantastic ingredients and everyone should enjoy them. But yeah, I think there is a dissonance. I think we've really felt it over the last few years in particular, as the region's kind of been plunged into horrific, acts. And I guess I do think there is a responsibility certainly for people in the food world, I think that if you are using these ingredients, if you're sharing them, if you're talking about them, I don't mean just like the average person cooking, but I think that if you're working in the industry, then I think it's really important not only to acknowledge the source of all of these ingredients and dishes, but also, the history of how they came to be about. So I think, with the sharing comes responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think at the very back of Sabzi, you have this section about advocating for a fairer food system, and you kind of call out different farms or like food producers that you are interested in buying ingredients from. And I think that's a part of it as well, which is if you're buying heritage cultural ingredients, like that can be an act of supporting people who have been growing that food for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that point, I'm just going to give a huge shout out to one of my favorite producers. They're producers that I've had the lovely privilege of visiting in the West Bank. They're the Canaan Collective, and they produce the most incredible Palestinian olive oil, as well as za'atar and almonds and dates. So a whole range of products. You can get them in so many stores, like Whole Foods Market has them, like they're everywhere. You can also kind of source them directly from their website. And they're such great producers. I visited the women's co-ops. I've spent time with the farmers. These are people on the front lines of producing products in circumstances that are quite frankly unimaginable. And the fact that they create such incredibly, I first went to them because I was just like, hey, I'm interested in the ethical story, but they won me over and I still get the olive oil from them because it just tastes so good. So I think we can all use our bucks to really support the people, the producers, I think, who I guess are having a significant impact.
Yeah, it is an exceptional olive oil. I cook with it myself. I think it's special to call out on the show. I wanted to ask you about something that you briefly mentioned before and you talk about in the book, which is your time in Thailand working at a wellness retreat. I think in the year 2025, I can't not ask you about White Lotus and if you've watched the show and if it felt at all in the same universe as your experience.
Well, yeah, it definitely wasn't as high end. It wasn't as luxury, but yeah, it's totally similar. I mean, I was in Koh Phangan, one bay along from where the full moon parties were. I would say that like there are a lot of people who look like Rick, like roaming around those islands.
Yeah, there are.
You're always like, why are they here and what are they doing? But yeah, so I actually wasn't. But I've been to a lot of those places in Samui, Koh Samui, where that was kind of based and filmed. So there are a lot of points of connection. It is very weird how you do get a particular subset of tourists either on like a spiritual journey and wanting to experience it in that way. But yeah, no, unfortunately, no stories as good as the ones in the White Lotus.
Maybe that's for the best. It seemed like it would be a very stressful place to work.
Right, yeah.
Now that the book is out, I'm curious what your home cooking is like these days and if you've started to introduce meat or if you're still on this kind of plant-based focus.
Actually, vegetable-based cooking is such a huge part of it. So I feel like that's a good balance. I don't kind of miss it at all. And I feel that, occasionally eating meat and fish is also good for me. But I really encourage anyone who's even curious about perhaps, incorporating more vegetables into their diet of picking up Sabzi, because there are some really easy recipes in there that can deliver so much flavor and are so good for midweek cooking. And I think that hopefully will bring a little bit of Middle Eastern and Mediterranean joy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in the summer, like there's so many exciting vegetables to cook with, and it's such a great guide to kind of look for something that you picked up at the market or that you need to use up maybe and see what you could make from it.
Yes.
There's one other thing I wanted to ask about before we do our lightning round to close. I was reading the book and I loved learning about how Ruth Reichel's book, Comfort Me with Apples, was an important moment for you. I'm curious what food writing or food writers you admire or are enjoying reading.
Yes, that book. Honestly, I reread it like every few years. I think it's so powerful. There's so much about it I love. So that was the book that I remember when I was in Thailand. I picked it up and I read it, and it really opened my eyes to how expansive food writing can be. It's a really powerful memoir. The other food writers who I really like, or who've influenced me, well, I'd say that Claudia Roden's Book of Jewish Food was a real influence. Again, it was this idea that you could use food to go on a huge kind of historical and anthropological dive into a culture, into a people. So that was very influential. I really love the work of Olia Hercules. She is a Ukrainian chef who has just written a memoir, actually, called Strong Roots. And I love her cookbooks because they have introduced me to a part of the world which I just knew so little about. And she's such a strong writer. I mean, her work is so transporting. So I love hers. And she's got these Ossetian pies. And I think it's from maybe like her second cookbook, which are these like incredible little pies stuffed with like greens and like a kind of a white cheese. Oh, it's so good.
Recently in the show, we took a deep dive into the amazing world of Dijon mustard with help from our friends at Mai. Mai brings over 270 years of French craftsmanship to every jar of premium Dijon mustard. Since 1747, Mai has been perfecting the art of flavor, transforming everything from simple sandwiches to gourmet meals. Look for the Oh My, It's a Great Talk About Dijon Mustard episode in the This Is Taste podcast feed. Embark on a gastronomic tour through Europe's finest flavors with European Tasty Tales, a podcast series that explores interesting stories behind traditions, taste, and iconic European Union products such as Italian Pecorino Romano, Croatian extra virgin olive oil, and Irish whiskey. Each episode celebrates the stories, culture, and people behind these extraordinary culinary experiences. Start your tasty adventure today by listening to European Tasty Tales on Spotify.
So to close today, I want to play a rapid fire game with you. I'm going to make you play some favorites, and you can just tell me the first answer that comes to mind.
I love rapid fire rounds. Let's go.
Okay, great. Your favorite cookbook right now that's not one of your own?
Bustani by Sami Tamimi. Oh, I've got two. Can I give two? I'm going to give two.
Yeah. Say it fast.
Lugma by Noor Murad. Honestly, I think it's one of the best cookbooks that's kind of come out in the last kind of few years. I absolutely love it. There's this Bahraini dal that I cooked from it this weekend. It introduces the flavor of like Bahrain and the Gulf states, and almost everything I've tried so far is just perfect.
Yeah, I loved speaking with Noor on the show about the book. It's such a great one. Okay, your go-to late night snack?
Fruit, granola, and yogurt. It's like what I have if like you're a bit hungry at like 10 o'clock. Like that's what I have. It's like the wrong time of day. You should be having it in the morning, but I have it in the evening.
Your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, that's really hard. This is really boring, but I'm just going to say vanilla. But stay with me. I feel like a good vanilla ice cream, like that's made with good cream, with like proper vanilla, can be something really special.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite season for cooking?
summer. I mean, summer's like the best season for everything.
Yeah.
But it's late summer specifically, August, early September, when the markets are really full. You've got kind of the end of season tomatoes. You've got all the eggplant. Oh, it's just, the squash is just coming through. The figs are kind of there. It's just perfect.
Your favorite London bakery?
This isn't just because I'm really close to it, but Jolene is incredible. I buy my sourdough from there. They do great pastries, and it's just like the perfect place to stop for like a coffee and a little treat.
Your favorite special occasion restaurant in London?
So my favorite restaurant for a special occasion in London is Quo Vadis. It's a gorgeous little place in Soho. A wonderful place if you're celebrating. They've got a brilliant cocktail bar. They do oysters, but they've also got just really hearty, homely food. So I was there a few weeks ago, and there was like a wonderful like pie and pommes frites, but then just an incredible like niçoise salad. Just, it has like something for everyone.
Okay, final question. What you would consider to be an underrated utensil or cooking tool?
I think just everyone needs to have a microplane. Like, they're just perfect for zesting, citrus fruit, for mincing ginger. Honestly, I feel like it's like the only bit of kit you really need. And I just always buy it for my friends as gifts. Like, if you have a birthday coming up and you don't have one, that's probably what you're going to get.
That's a great answer. I love my microplane, and I do need a new one if you're ever in the market to gift another one. Yasmin, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.